Hey, and welcome back. For this Railfan trip, we're on CSX's CC subdivision again. I usually have an idea of where I'd like to Railfan before heading out, but today I didn't have anywhere special picked out. When Railfanning CSX, I head to Latonia and do a signal check. This video is from a different day, but it will show you where I stop. This signal, with its clear aspect, controls movements heading south toward Louisville on the LCL subdivision. Here you can see one of the corresponding northbound signals. I find it interesting because there's a signal for each track ahead of the switch, but there's another signal right after they single up. I assume that's because it's the control point before the line joins the CC sub, and it's here so trains don't block the crossings if they have to wait. Next, I had to check this signal on the CC for southbound traffic. It seems anything on the number 1 main, the track on the right as we're looking at it, heads down the LCL. The switch is almost always lined for that, which is how it's currently aligned with its slow, clear aspect. Anything on the number 2 track usually makes its way along the CC, or at least to the DeCourcy yard. Lastly, I drive a few more blocks and take a look at the northbound CC signals. You can't see them too well in this video, but they're bright enough to see even on sunny days from quite a ways away. The first train we'll see is a northbound tanker at Lambs Ferry. That's a few miles south of where we were. Unfortunately, I didn't catch its symbol. The drone gives us an aerial view as it approaches the crossing, and then we can see how the tunnels were carved into the hillside. My guess is that it's a K train, but there are about a dozen that head through Corbin heading north. Here we get another look at it, this time showing the crossing setup as well as how wide open the area is. One last look as the engines go by. This time we'll zoom in to see it enter the tunnel. We'll fast forward a little bit to the end of the train. After all, it is just tanker after tanker after tanker. While we wait for the second train, let's take a quick look around. We can see 2 different style mile markers next to the tracks. You can see the old school style, concrete marker with cap on the number 1 track, and then a simple steel plate marker on the number 2 track. The number 1 is much less frequently used based on the rust on the rails. Here's a little comparison. The number 1 also has a 10-mile-an-hour speed limit through the area compared to the 25 miles an hour on the number 2. One more big difference, take a look at the tunnel shapes. You can see number 2 is wide, but not as tall as the number 1. The number 1 is a much tighter squeeze, but it looks like it might be able to handle an auto rack. My guess is that tight fit is why the speed limit is so much lower. Let's jump to another day and another train. This time, it's a southbound, Q541. I hope you don't mind all the engine shots. I find them to be the most interesting part of the train. This train runs from the Queensgate Yard to Rice Yard in Waycross, Georgia. For those not familiar with the CC sub, also known as the Licking River route, it runs from Covington to Corbin and is around 180 miles in length. It was originally chartered by the Covington and Lexington Railroad in 1849. It was the first railroad heading south from the Cincinnati area, but due to a lack of money, the line didn't actually cross into Cincinnati. That didn't happen until C&O built its bridge in 1888. the line reached Paris, Kentucky, which we'll check out in just a bit, in 1856. Eventually, the Louisville and Nashville took over the line. It was an important coal hauling route, but no longer. North of where we are is the DeCourcy Yard. It's no longer in service and mainly just used to hold trains out from Cincinnati, but it was L&N's biggest yard. It was a nice, albeit very cold day, so I figured I'd give a little chase. Worried I wouldn't be able to get in front of the train and set up my cameras, I decided Paris would be my next vantage point. Well, I probably could have caught it in Falmouth and Cynthiana. I've waited for more than an hour near the Trackside Cafe and in front of the Trans-Kentucky Transportation Facility. I've included a link to a great article about TTI and its coal hauling route to Maysville. While waiting, let's do a little exploring around Paris. You can see there was what appears to be a second track going across this bridge, but it's been gone a long time. Feel free to comment if you have any information on the area. I'd love to know more. Here's a quick look at the Bourbon County Courthouse. I also like the signals here. We can see the clear signal for the approaching Q541. I think I hear a train coming, so let's get back to the action. Even though I was waiting for it, when it rounded the bend, the train actually snuck up on me. I can't wait to get a shot when it's warm and all the plastic wrap is not hiding the depot. As we look west, we see the TTI yard. From what I can find, it seems like the facility is used only for car storage now. If anyone knows anything about TTI or the future of the line between here and Maysville, I'd love to know more. While the train went by, I thought about whether or not I should try to make the 30-minute drive to Ford and try to catch Q541 one last time. Figured, I've come this far, why not? The light was fading fast as I pulled up to the crossing next to the Kentucky River. There was a northbound, most likely my train's counterpart, Q542, already going by, but it was gone before I could get any cameras set up. I did a quick signal check. The number 1 track was lit up red, but the number 2 signals were dark. I then thought I saw a faint light inside the tunnel on the other side of the river. I hit record and sent my drone to investigate. It was an engine move. The 3 locomotives pulled just shy of the signal and stopped. I sent my drone along the abandoned track to get a better look. Here we get a view of the closed bridge. The water looks like it's almost had some sort of coloring agent added to it. As we pull up behind the engines, we can see they're still staring at a stop signal. Every time I've seen a train come through this area, they're always on the number 1 track headed south or diverge onto it heading north. And eventually, this power move would diverge as well. It was getting dark and my cameras were struggling to get enough light, but luckily, it came through just in time. I do wonder why they held the train on the main line. Q542 should have been into the next block to allow the movement. I also wonder why only the signal on the number 1 track in the opposite direction of this move was lit up. I'm guessing the number 2 signal only lights up when there's a train in the block. We'll follow it for a bit, but there's no sign of Q541. I checked the signals again, and it was the same story. Red on the number 1, dark on the number 2, and the northbound was red as well. Unfortunately, it just got too dark and I had to call it a day. I had a lot of fun despite the cold. I don't know if this was a typical trip or maybe Q541 had more air troubles. That actually delayed it more than an hour from the start of its trip. But it certainly took a lot longer than I expected for a train to cover the distance, especially since it didn't have anything I could tell coming against it. Well, that does it for another adventure. I hope you had fun. Until our next trip, have a great day.